Hi, welcome to another workshop here at Hofa College. My name is Marvin and I'm an audio engineer at the Hofa Studios. Today we are streaming live on YouTube and also on our online campus for all our students out there. Today I want to show you a few tips for using reverb in your productions. I hope there are some new things that you don't know yet and that you get a little bit of inspiration by this workshop. So it's getting pretty advanced and you should know how to set up a reverb in your DAW, and yeah, you should know the most common parameters of a reverb plugin. But if you want to learn more about the basics of mixing, I can recommend you the mixing modules of our Hofa College. So let's dive right into the mix. Today I have a production here, an ongoing production of mine, which consists of drums, bass guitar, normal guitars and lead vocals. And yeah, let's just have a listen what I got here.
It took a while till I found out there was nothing to be scared about. It took a while till I found out there was nothing to be scared about.
Yeah, so there are a few reverb things going on here, which I want to show you in the next hour. And let's just start with the drums. So I want to listen to the drums in solo isolated. So let's have another listen to them isolated. Yeah, so the reverb on the snare drum is it is pretty noticeable because of its length, and this is already the first tip which I have for you. You should always ask yourself what element you have to put a reverb on and which role does it play in your mix. So drums, especially in this song, have a rhythmic function and are punchy, so a pretty long reverb does not work so good. So we want to lower the decay time of the reverb. By the way, this is the reverb which I got here on the snare drum. And the first option that we have to lower the decay time is obviously to reduce here the reverb time. And let's have a listen what this would sound like. And back. Yeah, you can hear that the lower reverb time obviously plays a better role here for the drums. But here the problem is if you lower the reverb time, the impression of your reverb sound gets different. It is perceived smaller and not as impressive as before. So we will try another thing here. So we will set the reverb time back to 100% and use the IR cut feature. So as this plugin is an impulse response reverb, we can use this feature and just cut the impulse response after a certain time. Here it is 185 milliseconds. And with a little fade out time, you can see that pretty good here. You can adjust this fade out. Yeah. And also the length. And let's have a listen what this would sound like. Without the IR cut. On with the IR cut. And obviously now it is the volume is pretty high, so I make it more realistic and lower the level of this reverb. And without any reverb, you can hear it's pretty dry. And with the normal reverb, so this does not work so good. We need a more punchy, short, rhythmic reverb. Yeah. So this is a really nice feature to use this IR cut. So in the first few milliseconds, you have actually exactly the same sound as before. So this makes it to have the same big room impression, and we get rid of the rest of the reverb tail, and this has the advantage that the drums remain big and punchy, and also it adds this certain spatial depth to it. So the next thing I want to talk about is the pre-delay. I keep the IR cut because this works quite good for me. And no, here it was already on, but now let's have a listen what it sounds like without pre-delay. And with pre-delay now. And without. Yeah, you can hear it has a really huge difference, although it's only 50 milliseconds. And I think, in my opinion, 50 milliseconds on drums are too long. And here something like 20 milliseconds would work for me. Without it. And with the pre-delay. Yeah, you can hear with pre-delay the reverb on its own is much more noticeable, and there's a certain separation between the dry snare drum signal and the reverb tail. So this is a really, really good feature, not only on drums. I want to talk about that later on vocals. But yeah, the pre-delay. With the pre-delay, you can position your dry signal more in the front or in the back of your mix just by adjusting a little bit of the pre-delay. But obviously, not only the pre-delay plays a role here, and there are some more parameters that I want to talk about in the next minutes. So, but that was it for the pre-delay on the drums now. And next, I want to take a look at another impulse response that I can select here. In this IQ Reverb, there are a few spots, and you can also layer them. But for now, I want to have a listen on the impulse response number 2. Okay. Without the reverb and with. So this reverb is also pretty short. Maybe you did already notice that here the early reflections are pretty distinctive. So let's see what the reverb would sound like if we lower the early reflections. To do that, you can use the IR envelope feature. Yeah, it looks like this, and you can see here, if I activate the envelope, the impulse response will change, and I already draw something here. And yeah, let's see which difference this one makes. Yeah, early reflections on drums can often cause the drums to appear more trashy. I would call it like this. And if your certain impulse response you want to use makes it sound a little bit of trashy, you can try to reduce the early reflections like this and change your envelope and make them more quiet and let the impulse response fade in. So yeah, what did I want to say about this? Yeah, so since it's more trashy with the early reflections, and we activate this, it makes the reverb sound much more smooth, and all in all, the reverb is much more subtle, and it can fit better in the whole drum mix. For the next thing I want to show you, we are heading back to our impulse response number 1. And here I want to solo the snare drum. So this was the sound that we had. Without it and with reverb. And after we previously trimmed the early reflections, we now want to see how we can use the early reflections as an advantage by its own and isolate them. So there are 2 ways to do this, and the first one is to use the IR envelope again. And again, I did already something here. So if I activate this, you can see it quite good, and that the reverb tail is almost gone. So I have to turn it up here to make it more noticeable. So another thing, I want to talk about this soon, but now I want to first show you the second option. It is to use this menu right here. So we deactivate it here. And here it's more simple, and we can just activate and deactivate the reverb tail and the early reflections just by clicking the button. So let's see. You can hear here it's even more. It's shorter than wait a second, shorter than this. It's pretty short, so it's also really quiet, and you have to turn this up to realize something. And yeah, you don't really get an idea of the room or a reverb sound, but it has a character, spatial character, which you can use as an advantage. So to show you what it does exactly, I wanna take the IQ Analyzer here and first deactivate our reverb plugin. So if I play it here, here you can see there's a single line, which is normal, what we have to accept with a snare drum signal, since a snare drum is usually just a mid signal, so it's only mono and there isn't any stereo information. But if we turn these early reflections up here, you can see here the snare drum becomes or gets some interesting character and gets a little bit more wide. And I think we should listen to this on the drum bass. And here you have to listen really carefully. It makes a little bit of detail here and adds some nice character. So let's listen again. Yeah, so the snare drums appears a little bit more in the front and a little bit more wide and interesting. And yeah, this leads me to another point, another tip, which I want to mention here. And here, as you can see, there is not only on-off button for the reverb tail and the early reflections, but there's also a volume button. And if you're playing around with the relation between early reflections and the reverb tail, you can kind of position your dry signal more in the front or in the back, as we could already do a little bit with the pre-delay. But here it's more of the room information. So enough talked. Let's listen and play around with these relations. Oh, it's really loud now. So I turn the early reflections up and down. And now you have to pay attention on the snare drum and close your eyes and see if it appears for you more in the back or in the front, if you change the relation of the reflections and the tail. Yeah, as you can hear, although the early reflections are a pretty little detail and are a really small phase in your whole impulse response, it really can cause the whole appearance of your signal and the room information if it seems more in the front or in the back, and you can play around with that really good. Yeah, so a really small detail which can add a nice difference and character to it. And yeah, I think that's it for the drums. Now I wanna take a look at the bass guitar. This is a little tip, and it's not that usual. You won't see this one so often, but it's something which I personally really like to put the room on the bass guitar. And yeah, let's have a listen. First, only the bass guitar. And now I will, now I will fade in the room. And without it, you can hear it's, if you listened to it with the room and mute it, your bass will appear pretty dry and kind of boring. So I want to show you how I achieved that bass guitar room sound. So I first deactivate all the plugins and just listen to this track. I used a simple Pro Tools stock plugin for this one. In the Hall algorithm, in the small mode. Pretty short decay. And you can hear, I wanted to add a nice detail which is not so dark, and just give you a lift up for the bass and some room informations, and not to boost the lower frequencies. So before the reverb plugin, I wanted to put a high pass filter on it. So these low frequency, the fundamental tone of the bass doesn't get to the reverb plugin. Let's have a listen what the difference is like. Yeah, it's much more thin, but this is what I wanted to achieve here, just to give it the bright shine. And the next thing, which is also a thing which I personally like, which can get quite crazy. Here the bass guitar is pretty clean, I would call it like this, but often in stuff that I mix, I have to work with bass guitars that are more heavy, and I like to play around with this saturation plugin. So all the way up it would sound like this. But since here it's a more clean and soft section of the song, I only work with 40%. But it adds also a nice character to it. And last but not least, it was, although I already did something here, it's too much rumble for me. So I attenuated this frequency section and boosted a little bit here. Yeah, so with it together. Yeah, it's quite interesting that you can shape the character and the energy of the bass guitar by these little plugin settings. And which is more important here is the context of the signals. So if I, for example, play the drums together with the bass guitar and fade in the bass room, one moment, no. And I mute the room and add the room. Yeah, since the room information of this jack here is quite similar to the room of the drums, which I want to make a little bit more up here. And we put these two elements together, the drums and the bass, and mute the room and activate it. I think you can hear pretty good what difference it makes. So you have more the feeling that the band stands together in a room, and this little bass room track, which is not that loud, causes the two elements to glue together, kind of, and have more of an authentic live energy, in my opinion. Yeah, it gives more live energy to it. So, yeah, I hope I could show you by these little tricks or inspire you that you can also put some EQing after the reverb if you listen to the reverb and say that there's missing something in the high mids or there's too much rumble, and yeah, work together with EQ and reverb to shape your room sound as best as possible. So yeah, and this leads me to the next part. Now we want to take a listen to the vocals. I solo them.
It took a while till I found out there was nothing to be scared about. It took a while till I found out there was nothing to be scared about. It took...
Yeah, and let's deactivate them.
It took a while till I found out.
Obviously, there's a huge difference since I turned the reverb and the delay quite up a bit. They are not so distinctive. So let's add the drums and the bass.
There was nothing to be scared about.
And I deactivate them.
It took a while till I found out. There was nothing to be scared about.
You can hear in this part I used the reverb not only for the spatial depth and to add some room information to it, but I wanted to create an atmosphere here which are fitting the vocals, and they are sang really, really softly. And since the rest of the song is more punchy and loud and heavy, I wanted this part to give more room and atmosphere, and the vocals are changing. And yeah, so I decided to turn the vocal reverb up quite a bit, but to be realistic, I want to turn that down for now.
It took a while till I found out. There was nothing to be scared about.
And as you already did see here, I do not only have a reverb, but also a delay. And I want to show you what difference the delay does have. So the reverb will be still on, and I will just mute the delay.
It took a while till I found out. There was nothing to be scared about. It took a while till I found out. There was nothing to be scared about.
Yeah, you can hear here the vocal delay causes to fill up the gap which is existing after the vocal line. So the vocal line stops, and there's kind of this little reverb tail which is fading down, and then there's you have the impression that there's something missing. So I worked with a delay which should work against this, and I want to show you how I did this. So there are two important things. The first one is the compressor on the delay track.
Took a while till I found out.
And it's not a usual compressor. It's a sidechain compressor, and I routed the dry lead vocal signal into the sidechain input of the compressor on the vocal delay track. And this causes the vocal delay to be more quiet if the vocal is still singing, and to open up when the vocals are fading away or are gone.
It took a while till I found out. There was nothing to be scared about.
And the next thing which I did here is to route the vocal delay into the vocal hall or the vocal reverb. And I mute the usual vocal reverb, but now we will hear the reverb which is only coming from the delay.
It took a while till I found out.
And
there was nothing
let's pay attention to the end.
about. It took a while till
go to the beginning again.
It took a while till
And the
I
end.
found out there was nothing to be scared about.
And you can hear first the attention is on the dry vocals, and if they are gone, the reverb tail is lifting up and gives a nice feature that it isn't changing too much when you listen to the song all in all. So now let's add the usual vocal reverb again.
It took a while till I found out there was nothing to be scared about.
And everything.
It took a while till I found out there was nothing to be scared about.
Okay, back in the loop.
It took a while till I found out there was nothing
And now,
to be
as all the
scared
instruments are in,
It took
if we
a
now
while
pay
till
attention to
I
the
found
reverb on the
out
vocals, it seems
there was nothing to be
almost
scared.
gone. And this is the next tip that I want to give to you. If you're adjusting the reverb levels, you always, first obviously, you can listen to your single signal, for example, the snare drum or the vocals on its own, and adjusting the reverb. But at the end, to set up the right reverb level for a single instrument, you always have to check it in the context of all signals. And most of the time, you have changed something there. Or the other way around, let's say you have mixed your song already pretty good and now switch back and listen to one element at its own. And then you are thinking, oh, okay, and the reverb seems pretty loud. I want to turn that down now. But if everything seemed fine in the context of all signals when everything did play, you shouldn't change something there. Yeah, so that's another quite important tip here. Okay, and the next tip that I want to give to you is also in terms of the sum and everything together. It's the limiting or any kind of dynamic processing on your mix bus, because this can also have a big difference on the appearance or the impression of your reverb sounds that you created. So let's move to the part with the drums. It sounds like this. And now I want to add the limiter. First, let me switch back to check the reverb levels. Like my last tip was, I always have to check the levels when I play back all instruments at once. So let's adjust the levels now. And now we can hear the snare drum reverb much more clear, since the reverb tail was attenuated quite a bit, but now it's normal again. And now we want to add the limiting and see what change of the reverb we can hear.
You took a while to life on out. There
And
was
without,
nothing to be scared about. You took a while to life on out.
with,
There was nothing to
you can pay attention especially to the snare drum hits and the appearance of the room after each of these hits.
You took a while to life on out. There was nothing to be scared about. You took a while to life on out. There was nothing to be scared about.
Yeah, I think you can hear it pretty good. So this one is the next tip. You not should only listen to all of the instruments to adjust your reverb levels. You should also listen to the your summing processing, like the dynamic processing on the mix bus to adjust the final reverb levels. Since as we did here, if you're getting quite of a bit gain reduction on the limiting or any kind of compression, the loud parts or the hits of the dry signal are attenuated. There's some gain reduction, and the rest of the reverb tail, which is not, which doesn't have to be attenuated. This one is in relation lifted up, and yeah, finally this limiting leads the reverb to be much more louder and to have another impression of the room. So let's you don't should always wait for the limiting at the end of your mixing process. You can turn some limiting put some limiting in your mixing chain quite in the middle of your mixing process. So I think that's it for my tips that I had in this workshop. And yeah, I hope I could give you some inspiration and a few new tips to work with impulse responses. And let's see you in the next workshops, and stay tuned. Bye.